maybe one or two quick 30-second or less comments from someone would be good, but we have to move on.
Exactly. They just told me it was out at 38, so my fault. Just a couple of quick suggestions. So let's prioritize what we just said all together. If you should just choose one of the topics, what you do first, Dalia?
Sorry, the question again?
Monica, you're muted.
Okay. So again, I'm losing the time. Again, Dalia, the first thing you choose among everything that has been mentioned in 10 seconds.
Is to find a way to connect what is local with what is regional and what is international.
Linda,
in the work of think tanks.
Your first take. Linda?
Oh, now you're muted.
We're gonna have to move on here.
No way. So we have to move on. Thanks so much. And let me thank you, Jim, and all the community as a media person and a media representative for everything you as think tanks do for creating documents that are accountable and so helpful for all of us. So thank you very much. And the floor is yours, Jim, for the next panel. Thank you.
Okay, Monica, and this panel has reminded me of the image that I was searching online while the program was going on, being an aerial artist over the Grand Canyon in terms of the fear and trepidation of managing a massive online event with many moving parts. But we've done it successfully, and we're reaching the end, and I'm becoming calm as we go forward. And I want to thank the last panel. It illustrates, which was the intent, the power and the diversity of think tanks around the world. I don't encourage or pursue that in all of the programs that we do because it's politically correct. I do it because it makes sense. Corporations and other institutions have learned that to be innovative, to be responsive, requires that you engage and partner with a diverse set of institutions. I hope that the diversity that is reflected in all of the panels today mightily demonstrates that fact. It also throughout has identified the importance, the power of ideas and words, and the fact that they have impact and consequences, both negative and positive. And it is in the hands of the institutions to be constructive, to be forward-looking, and to engage with positive and constructive ideas, because the challenges we face are awesome. We opened with a wide lens in terms of perspectives on what we face. We now close the program with a range of perspectives from leading experts from around the world, a think tank, a leading think tank, a leading journalist, and a leading policymaker will now comment on how we move forward, how we cross boundaries, how we become constructive and meet the challenges that lie ahead. John Allen?
Yep. Hey, Jim. You just said a moment ago you're getting to the end, so you're calm. Tuning in today to see you calm was worth the entire ride. It's good to see you. Good to see everyone on the screen today, and it's wonderful to see so many old friends and colleagues, and to be in the presence of so many wonderful institutions that represent not just community leadership within the think tank community, but global leadership as well. And it's my distinct honor to stand amongst you today as one of your friends and colleagues. On the time since we last convened in this forum, I know many of us have been forced to reflect on what our organizations have been and what they might become in the years ahead. Hope has been in very short supply in some times, and in speaking before you all today, I remain optimistic and listening to you I remain optimistic about the year that's coming. Now, speaking from the American perspective, and disregarding politics or political affiliation, I think nearly all of us can agree that the tone and the tenor of the new Biden administration will usher in a new era of American leadership, one significantly more amenable fields of expertise. But more importantly, our individual and collective commitment to truth, to facts, science, and demonstrable expertise broadly. Now, as evidenced by his selection of cabinet members, many of whom come from our own think tank communities, to include the new Secretary of Treasury, who came out of Brookings, President Biden will seek to return to and to uphold values-based transformational leadership and demonstrate a renewed U.S. commitment to multilateralism. This broad sweep of change from the Trump era to one where truth and facts will once again matter will inevitably extend to the think tank community, where our words, our research, and our analysis will become the foundation of how the world will recover and renew in the days ahead. Indeed, with this new American administration at the helm, I believe we can look forward to an end of the America first, go it alone approaches, which in many respects have delivered us to where we are today. Instead, the potential for a coordinated global response is back on the table. We've been listening to it this morning, the vestiges of which are so powerful in today's session. Where we at Brookings now find purpose and value is focusing on the comprehensive nature of the American agenda under this administration, an agenda that in one form or another is not just an American agenda, but a global one as well. In short, it follows along 5 principal areas. First, controlling the pandemic, then recovering the economy, dealing with inequality and systemic racism exposed so tragically and graphically during this global, frankly, societal crisis, decisively addressing the looming disaster of climate and seeking multilateral solutions to complex global problems as we face them today. And underwriting all of it, shaping all of it, will be our ability to deal with emerging technologies such as AI. Now, any one of these crises has or will tax our governments and our respective institutions to the limit. And taken together, they have created stresses and pressures in capitals and in think tanks that we've not confronted in generations, perhaps ever. Now, all of this is hard, but hard doesn't mean hopeless. Here is our value as analysts and experts and leaders, but first we have a problem that we have to deal with in this complex world. It's the deterioration or the loss altogether of a commitment to truth. And solving this is the unique province of think tanks. Truth has been one of the greatest casualties of this pandemic, especially in the United States, where the American people have been confronted by constant lies and falsehoods and deceptions, complemented by conscious disinformation campaigns. And today, with nearly 26 million Americans sickened, 430,000 dead, and a reality for tens of millions of Americans that is twisted and unrecognizable, we have a challenge. We saw this on full and gut-wrenching display on 6 January, when thousands of Americans, at the behest of the president, stormed the very center of gravity of American democracy in a violent and overt attempt to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 American presidential election. So while all of us today are facing seemingly insurmountable challenges, one of the greatest and most immediate requirements for all of us is recovering our most powerful tool as think tanks in solving these crises. That is truth. Our capacity to undertake nonpartisan, fact-based, data-driven analysis is essential. First, to recovering some semblance of truth and reality, but also in directly confronting conscious efforts at disinformation that fuel and support all of the alternatives. Only then can we truly prescribe policy and scientific solutions to all of the other challenges that we're facing. Now, I remain confident as a global community and partnership of thinkers and visionaries, we may again be voices at the forefront of uplifting the lives of those around us and to help to build back better a world in the aftermath of this pandemic. And I'd like to close with the words of America's first ever youth poet laureate, Amanda Gorman, who spoke powerfully at the presidential inauguration a week ago yesterday And in her poem, she said something that stuck with me. She said, "There is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it. If only we are brave enough to be it." So listening to us today, I believe that we as a global community of think tanks have not only the collective power to see the light, I believe we have the collective capacity to be the light, to illuminate the way forward, to discover truth for the good of all humankind during this dire moment. So with that, my resounding and continued thanks to Jim McGann and to the wonderful community that I had the opportunity to see today, and for organizing this important event, which celebrates the rankings which Jim has issued today. Thank you all. Please be safe. Please be well.
David Sanger, the national security correspondent for the New York Times. David?
Well, thank you very much, Jim. It's great to be here. It's great to be here with my friend John as well, and to join Vera in all of this. I come to this conference as a little bit of a hybrid producer. I'm both a consumer of think tank data and occasionally a producer of it. As a news reporter, I am constantly ingesting all of this that you turn out, looking for new insights, looking for new experts along the way, looking to find ways to challenge my own preconceptions. I've been at this reporting job at the New York Times for 38 years now, 26 of them in Washington, which is pretty remarkable since I was assured it would only be a 3-year assignment. I would say that the biggest risk of my job is the same risk that we all worry about as we read each other's reports, as we talk within the community of think tanks, and that's that we inhale the same fumes every day. So that while having new approaches and new scholarship is very useful, we have to think about ways to challenge the thinking that we've always had. I'm also a producer of a very modest amount of think tank product. As a book writer, I've been fortunate enough to have fellowships at 3 very different kinds of think tanks. For my first book at the Center for New American Security, at the Woodrow Wilson Center for Scholars, and of course, apart from the Times, my other home base is the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard, where I'm a senior fellow and teach a class at the Kennedy School, and I'm also active at the Council on Foreign Relations. So I've been to a number of places that are in your rankings, Jim. I've contributed to some of their reports, I've joined some of their study groups, and it's given me a little bit of vision into what I think works and what doesn't, and what we might think about doing differently. And we've heard elements of this over the course of the morning. It strikes me that there are 3 big challenges, and John just focused on one of the most important, I think, which is the general mistrust in institutions, in expertise, in what we all believe must be the triumph of fact over mythology and facts over the big lie. We've seen disinformation at a remarkable pace in the past year. The most striking finding to me is that tens of millions of Americans who still believe the election was fixed, despite the absence of any evidence that stood up in court or even stood up the laugh test in many cases. We see tens of millions of Americans who believe the worst of the anti-vax rumors, a big threat to our ability to get out of the COVID era. John mentioned the lessons of the January 6th attack, spurred on by the president, but rooted really in a willingness to go attack the constitutional system because people believed in disinformation. And I think to the think tank world, that systemic distrust in institutions is very threatening, because think tanks are viewed by many as the feeder of the deep state, the place that policymakers go when they're out of power, a place that corporations sometimes finance to bolster the findings that they find would be supportive of their business and their position. And so we have to think about ways to punch through to audiences that are not our usual ones. In other words, not just to speak to the elites who are the only ones likely to read a brilliant 300-page study of how to reform the Affordable Care Act or come up with the next great Iran deal. So to John's point that we have to confront the distrust in institutions, he's absolutely right. But I think we have to do more than that because we have to confront it where it is. The people who distrust the institutions the most are not likely to be reading the output of what many of the think tanks joining us here today are writing. Now, we've had the same problem in the news business, and I would hardly sit here to tell you today that media organizations are a model for how to overcome distrust in America. In fact, when you read the polls, we're actually trusted less than Congress and less than lawyers, and that takes a fair bit of work when you think about it to get to that point. But we have managed to do one thing that I think tanks would be wise to go examine and think about how they might apply themselves. And that's to come up with newer formats that reach audiences where they are instead of waiting for them to come to us. Think about The Daily, which is, of course, the Times' wildly successful podcast. It now attracts 4 million listeners every morning. They are younger and they are a different audience than traditionally reads the New York Times. It's available for free, so you don't need to be a Times subscriber. And think about that number in these terms. During most of my career at the Times, we were satisfied with 1.4 million print readers on Sunday and a somewhat smaller audience during the week. We're now up to 6 million subscribers, and a lot of that is because we have taken new approaches like The Daily to go to where the news consumers are, and to give it to them in the format that they want to hear about. And that mission is hardly over. It's only started. Many of my think tank friends have tried to replicate this. They've created podcasts of their own. Some of them are quite good. They've taken their acts on the road. Jim, you even took some of your studies about how think tanks can communicate better on the road. And, this has been impeded some by COVID. But I think we have to view that only as a start and really spend time thinking about how you go to audiences that normally would not consume what you're producing. The second big step is to resist the temptation to come up with the perfect policy solution. This is really hard for us because in our straightforward way, reinforced by the education we've all had, we lay out a problem, we think about its causalities, we think about our strategic objectives, we write a study that comes up with the ideal solution. And then, of course, what happens? We hit political reality, where the political solution is crushed up in the grinder of the political mood of the moment. And then we try to jam the two together in a compromise. Everyone leaves unhappy. We start with a new cycle of studies about how we could perfect what already got ground up. Climate change is a great example of this phenomenon. We've seen it happen a few times. So was the Iran deal, which I covered day to day. We had Iranian and American technical experts who sat down, came up with perfect ways to solve the problem, but it involved steps that would be symbolically unacceptable in the Iranian parliament and impossible to explain at a Senate Foreign Relations Committee meeting.
1 minute remaining.
So I'd advocate starting with the understanding that politics are as important as substance and focus on solutions that are likely to have a bigger short-term effect. And the third is to focus on free speech and free academic inquiry. We've come over the years to accept these as givens. We know the risks. More than ever, we hear about unacceptable ideas on the left and the right, and we've seen some pretty disturbing efforts to silence those. We've seen ideological litmus tests on climate from the left, on gun control and abortion from the right, and that's only the start. So I would urge that we move away from a concept in which we're sending viewers, readers to a think tank that appeals to their existing biases. The way people go to Fox or Newsmax for reinforcement of ideas on the right, or to the MSNBC, or to read the New York Times editorial page on the left. Our goal here has to appeal to those who would ordinarily reject our views, not because of what we're saying, but because of who is saying it. And there we have to be willing to stand up for the expression of the idea we hate, as Oliver Wendell Holmes put it so well, because silencing bad ideas aren't going to make them go away. We've learned that this year, if we've learned anything. I thank you very much, Jim, for the chance to come talk and be with this group, and I wish you all luck and safety.
Thank you very much, David and John. I would suggest before Vera speaks that it would be beneficial an engagement of both think tanks on the left and right, and for President Biden in the U.S. and a possible corollary in Europe to have an imploribus unum tour from many one that we need to get out of Washington, out of Brussels, and engage those who may not share our opinion. There are those that in the 20,000 that were in Washington that nothing you will do will change, but there is a significant number of people who we need to engage, and we can engage them from the nation's capital. I am pleased that our next speaker, Vera Jourova, is the Vice President for Values and Transparency for the European Commission. Vera, please.
Thank you very much, James. Ladies and gentlemen, you have no clue how happy I would be to leave Brussels and to meet real people and to go to Washington and to go to Brookings. I was several times, and it was always so inspirative. And always my trips to Washington and discussions with the people active in the think tanks made me quite convinced that we are facing the same problems. There are global problems which Europe and the US are facing, and so that it's quite logical that these global problems require global responses. And I think that we can now renew the collective energy. And what John Allen quoted from Mr. President Biden's speech, I agree that yes, we are able to see the light together. And maybe we are able to be the light, and we can find solutions for so many pressing issues which we see in democratic world. I'm not speaking about the issues we see in non-democratic world, but we don't have enough time to cover everything. I'm responsible for values. And you can imagine what kind of portfolio it is. It is not ticking the boxes. This is about permanent work. And just when I mentioned the Holy Trinity, rule of law, democracy, and fundamental rights, you can imagine that it's not business as usual. I started the work in the Commission in 2014, and it was not such a pressure those days. We were in some kind of strange naivism that it will take forever. It is the democracy, it's perpetuum mobile. We do not have to do anything. It just works. The people believe in democracy. Democracy delivers. The people trust democratic institutions. Well, these were happy times. We are not in them anymore. And of course, not only what we saw in Capitol at the beginning of January, but also what we see in many other places, what we see in many surveys in the EU, which say that in some countries, in some member states of the EU, up to 40% of the people believe that democracy does not deliver security and better access to justice and many other valuable things. Simply, this is something we have to work more about. We have to nurture democracy, and we have to defend the rule of law. And you can imagine in this portfolio, I have a lot of questions or matters where you cannot make compromises. This is not 1 + 1 = 2. no black and white. These are the identity issues, the issues of the rights, where no compromise is possible, in fact. And that's why these are the divisive issues. That's why these are the values-related issues are the ones which are causing the more and more the divisions in the society. And COVID-19 has amplified that. James, stop me when needed, yeah, because now I don't keep the paper with the papers. It's always dangerous.
You have another minute or so.
Okay. COVID-19 has amplified the negative things we saw already before. And as we heard from David, the disrespect to the truth and to the expert opinion. Well, it was there. And it is still there, but at the beginning of COVID crisis, I had a feeling that we start to trust more the authorities, that because we realize that to survive this, we need to believe in something and believe somebody. But still, in spite of them, the avalanche of disinformation, which you see in the US and we see in the EU, it is something which makes us take action to come with the response. But the problem is that disinformation is not an illegal content. We are far from introducing any kind of censoring the content. Yeah, this is harmful content. It can do big harm to health and lives of people. But in Europe, we are extremely careful not to come with any solutions which might end up in some kind of censorship. Believe me, it would be a fantastic career if I become the commissioner of the truth. Yes, so believe me, as somebody who lived half of the life in the regime with one only doctrine, one official truth, you can imagine, I don't want this to see again. And I'm really far from helping this to happen. And we know that good intentions sometimes pave the way to the hell. And so that's why we are in Europe extremely careful. We have the so-called democratic action plan, where we are coming with some solutions against disinformation, but none of them mean that we will push Facebook to remove the content. And we make a strict line between the harmful content as disinformation and illegal content, which is hate speech, so speech which has the potential to incite violence, which is probably what we heard from President Trump, because we saw this in practice. We have under the illegal content child pornography, extremism, and terrorism. And these are the kinds of content we will address by our legislation. This is the content which has no right to survive in offline world. So why should we see this flourishing in online world? This doesn't make any sense.
Thank you, Vera. Really, do you have a few closing comments?
Yeah, closing comments. For all these pressing issues, what is the truth? What is the lie? Who is the consumer and who is the citizen? What is political and what is not political content? For all these questions, and plus the rule of law chapter, I don't have time to go into that, but we have plenty of work ahead of us to restore the principle of rule of law everywhere in Europe. For all that, I need think tanks. I need cooperation with the think tanks and with the smart people who have different opinions, but especially when you work in the field, which is so full of sensitive societal and political questions, well, you must not come with the solutions which you invent by the table in the Brussels office. That's why I am open to work with think tanks of course, in Europe, in European member states, because it's also important to hear what the East and what the West is saying. In Europe, we have different history. different approaches. It's important to listen, maybe sometimes rather than speak. And of course, for me, it's important to cooperate with American think tanks and with all of you, because we need to find the proper solutions for these pressing issues together. I'm convinced about that. Thank you very much.
Vera, thank you very much. Just some quick closing comments. Throughout the morning, we have heard about the dramatic increase in the rate of technology, the disruptive and transformative power of social media, social networks, artificial intelligence, and big data. And most importantly, what I describe as the increased velocity of information and policy flows and our ability to grapple with that and respond to it, which is compounded by global information tsunamis and the ever-increasing information interdependence and the rise of information warfare. Populism, and as some may say, the king is dead, long live the king. Trump is not, and Trumpism is not dead. Populism is not unique to the United States. We must get out and address and engage so that we can find common ground and can address the daunting challenges we face. I want to thank everyone, all of the panelists, all of the speakers from beginning to end for their significant contributions, which demonstrate, one, the importance of journalists, policymakers, and think tanks coming together, and for the global community, which is now realized, to come together to form partnerships, to forge partnerships, to address the challenges we face. I'm now, the global go-to rankings are now released. I want to point out that for many years, each and every region looks to the day when its think tank or one of its think tanks in the region will be named as the top think tank in the world because of the numerical advantage and the advanced development of think tanks in Europe and the US. Most of the top think tanks have come from those regions. 60% of all think tanks are from those regions. I am pleased, however, to announce that the top think tank in the world is the Japanese Institute for International Affairs, the first think tank in Asia to achieve that wonderful status in terms of think tanks in the world, and we want to congratulate them. And you now all have a list of the rankings. You can download it from the University of Pennsylvania Scholarly Commons. And I want to thank all of you for your wonderful contributions and for taking time out of all of your busy schedules to be with us today. Thank you and have a great weekend.